What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the Immortal Hulk. Yes, we are. Red God Hulk versus Thor or the Avengers. I'm not really sure what I'm going to call it yet, but this is basically like the most powerful version, or not, I wouldn't say the most powerful version, but it's a super powerful version of the Hulk. I think he's incredibly powerful. The biggest issue with this is we don't really get like a World War Hulk storyline with him, but it is really, really cool. What this does, those of you guys who recall, the Red God Hulk, if we want to call him that, it's like Savage Hulk just pulsing with Red Hulk energy, had essentially come up against the UFOs. Now, the UFOs, as we talked about in the previous video that we did, for those of you guys who were catching up, were basically longtime enemies of the Incredible Hulk, but had recently been contacted by Peter Gyrich. Of course, Gyrich basically being like a government agent who was a longtime foe of the X-Men and is now kind of being invoked here. So Marvel's obviously turning him into one of these guys where they just kind of circulate him around based on the nature of the story. I'm surprised to see him in here, but the UFOs have always proven to be pretty capable with regards to the Incredible Hulk. The biggest thing that always set the UFOs back is they would bicker amongst each other, and that would basically give Hulk the opportunity to take them out. In this instance, like literally Red God Hulk just crushes these guys, and it's not even a contest, and they do everything they can. Even Vapor's helpless, and Vapor's arguably the most powerful member of the UFOs. Now, as you guys have probably figured out, Vapor's ability is to basically turn into pretty much any gas, and it doesn't even have to be a gas that you find on Earth. It can be a gas from like extraterrestrial landscapes or anything like that. And it's kind of crazy because she literally turns into sulfuric acid gas, right? Which should be enough to like dissolve the Incredible Hulk. To give you guys perspective on what we're dealing with here, sulfuric acid can dissolve metals, right? I usually charge it, but it can dissolve metals, right? You just break them down. If you add like water or alcohol to it, it'll just create heat, right? It'll create like a violent reaction, just explode. But it's nuts. It should be more than enough to take out the Incredible Hulk. Having it in a gaseous form is a way for her to just kind of envelope the Hulk. The problem with this is he completely inhales her, right? Like he completely inhales like this sulfuric acid gas and then just spits it back in the face of another member of the UFOs, right? And the problem is like Simon literally starts choking and dying on this stuff, right? Like that's kind of the crazy thing. The overall gist of this is that because of the really the power of the Immortal Hulk here, he's able to overcome these guys quite readily. And the result of this is that they kind of just whisk him away, right? Literally he just gets punched across across the sky, right across the land. And ultimately the UFOs end up contacting Henry Gyrich. And it's just like, okay, look, we kind of had him on the ropes. They didn't. And it's like, if your guys hadn't screwed up, then like we would have ultimately gotten a hold of him, right? We would have been able to bring him in. The problem with this is they're like, we're not a match for him now, right? Like whatever form he's in now is not enough for us to be able to take this guy out. We need something more. And that's when Henry Peter Gyrich basically ends up getting a hold of the Avengers and has the Avengers respond. And so following that, you essentially pick up in Manhattan. And of course, Immortal Hulk's not too worried about the UFOs at the moment. It's just kind of like, you know, like whatever, right? I mean, if they're going to come after me, they come after me, and I'll give them more of the same, right? I mean, you know, that's kind of the crazy thing. And so in the midst of this kind of thing where he's just kind of standing in this bar, one of the things to remember when it comes to the Hulk is that society at large is still fearful of him. Even though the Immortal Hulk is really more intelligent and kind of wants to be left alone to a degree, different things like that, this version, not necessarily the Immortal Hulk, but a more intelligent version of the Hulk that's essentially powered by the mind of Joe Fixit. At the end of the day, people are still terrified of the Hulk, right? The fear still reigns supreme. And that's why you see this kind of crazy thing when it's just like, you know, people are horrified by this guy. The problem is that in the middle of all this, Thor shows up and immediately attacks the Immortal Hulk, right? Immediately goes after him. And this is one of those things where the response of the Avengers seems to be more or less containment, right? The idea that like the Immortal Hulk is probably going to go on a rampage again. And that's the overall assumption whenever it comes to the Hulk. Whenever the Hulk appears, unless it's some kind of a situation, you know, with like the Onslaught saga where he's necessary and the Avengers like call the Hulk in, or some kind of situation like that, whenever he's just kind of out there, the assumption is he's about to go and you know, cause craziness and all kinds of stuff. So the Avengers respond accordingly. But there's actually something else sort of going on here. Something else is actually happening. But the funny thing is that Thor, despite the power that he possesses, is just not enough for the Immortal Hulk. Now, this is something that I want to point out here. What this looks like, and we can't definitively say this because they look a little bit different, but what this looks like is the version of Thor who currently rules Asgard. And if that's the case, Thor has his equivalent of the Odin Force. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say this is like Immortal Hulk fighting Odin, and so like Immortal Hulk can beat Odin, but he's more powerful than your baseline version of Thor. And that's the whole significance behind this is the power boost that the Immortal Hulk got. Not only that, it's all the Avengers that are here. And this is why I say this is probably King Thor's, because you've got the current roster of the Avengers who are here. The reality of this is, even despite their best efforts, there's not a whole lot that they can do. To make things even more difficult, you've got the arrival of Red Harpy Betty, who shows up here, which is basically like another gamma irradiated mutate. I mean, we had a discussion on her previously, so make sure you guys check the Immortal Hulk playlist down in the description so you can get caught up and you can find out more about who she is. But what you end up getting here is essentially like this Red God Hulk facing off against like the Avengers. And that's kind of the nuts thing, is because this whole situation is kind of looked at and really even narrated by like Jennifer Walters, by She-Hulk. Now, there really isn't a whole lot she could do anyway against this level of power. I mean, there's not really even anything like Thor or like Iron Man or Captain America, Black Panther, or even Captain Marvel could do against this. But at the end of the day, she's kind of narrating it, and she's just like, all the Incredible Hulk knows is rage and chaos, right? That's all this thing knows. That's all it's known over the course of its life. That ever since the Hulk came into existence, all it's known is being chased and tracked down by various people. That it's like these small moments of reprieve when he finds a kind of ally in the Avengers, but for the most part, it's always somebody hunting him down, somebody attacking him, somebody coming against him. And really, Jennifer Walters sees this version of the Hulk as kind of like the epitome, right? This idea of the Hulk's rage given form. Now, this almost kind of seems to fly in the face of Worldbreaker Hulk, but that's one of the funny things to keep in mind, is even though Worldbreaker Hulk was the strongest version of the Hulk that we'd seen, the reality was that his rage had reached a point where it was almost a kind of inner calm, right? It was almost a point where he was just kind of, had reached like a stillness. Like, you ever had that where you get so pissed off that you're just calm, right? And that's almost like the scariest version of a person being mad, where they just kind of stop and calm down. And it's like, oh my God, right? Like, it's about to pop off, man. Like, that's kind of the crazy thing. And that's why you even see references to like Worldbreaker Hulk, where you kind of have this scenario where Blade is basically like thrown into the sky by Hulk. And then the response of Captain America, he tells Iron Man, go get him. And Iron Man's like, well, I mean, no, like, I mean, you guys can't stand against a Hulk on your own. And at the end of the day, like, Black Panther's like, no, we retain the advantage of numbers, right? Like, a single warrior is, you know, that's disciplined enough can handle the Hulk on their own. And that's when Hulk kind of comments and says, like, you know, like, you're disciplined enough. Like, if you're disciplined, how'd that work out for you last time? You know, and that's when Black Panther is like, I offered you mercy, right? Like, I attempted dialogue. You taught me a lesson when you crushed us all so badly. That's what's so kind of crazy about this, right? It's literally learning lessons from their experiences facing off against the Hulk. And so what you end up getting in the middle of this huge fight where the Avengers are quite literally just getting it handed to them is you have the arrival of Gamma Flight. Now remember, Gamma Flight is really trying to reel the Hulk back in, but get a better understanding of what's going on, because behind the veil of all of this, and that's the thing that Jennifer Walters does not initially pick up on here, but then starts to realize is kind of going on. Behind the veil of all of this is the one below all. There's a kind of rage that's permeating everybody, a kind of wrath that's even permeating Thor, right? Something behind the scenes that's kind of tugging and almost instigating, right? Almost increasing this kind of violence that each of these heroes have towards the Incredible Hulk and the kind of rage he has towards them. And there's this kind of comment, this kind of moment where you have Titania who approaches She-Hulk with the intention of trying to take her out. And the response of Titania, right, with Gamma Flight working alongside the Hulk group more or less, is, do we take out the She-Hulk chick or like, do we just let her stay? And the response of Betty is, no, like, she's with us, right? Like, you've seen the door, haven't you? And the response of She-Hulk is, yes, I've seen the green door. So she's aware that the green door exists. Now, whether or not she knows what lies beyond it isn't really explained here. We assume that maybe she does, but at the end of the day, the effects of the one below all kind of permeate out into everything. So much so that there's actually a point where Thor like smashes the hand of the Immortal Hulk with Mjolnir, and in doing that, literally just like destroys his arm, right? Like literally just fractures his arm. And then following that, like Immortal Hulk just takes the tentacles or the little bits of his arm that are there and starts to suffocate Thor. And it's one of the things that Jennifer Walters kind of hits on, is that like Thor's not normally like this, right? He's not normally this extreme and aggressive. That's not usually how he is, right? He can be if he needs to be, but it's almost like Thor's in a berserker state, but not in a berserker state. That the response of Thor would be one of containment and control, not like assault and almost like an attempt to kill. And that's the whole thing behind the Avengers, is understanding the Immortal Hulk as he exists, in the sense that he can always kind of be resurrected and always come back, and their experiences facing off against him in the past in his most powerful forms really leads them to the position of, we got to take him out. Black Panther literally cuts his arm off. I mean, it's things like that, right? It's really extreme in a lot of ways, the fight that's going on here. But that's when Jennifer Walters even looks at Black Panther and realizes, okay, so Black Panther is not necessarily governed by rage here, but the steps he's taking are even a little extreme for him, right? Where he just kind of looks at Hulk and it's just like, we have to kill him, right? Like, we have to kill this guy. And that's usually not the response of Black Panther. Like, the only time Black Panther really takes a response like that is if like somebody invades Wakanda, or they're like an imminent threat to Wakanda, or even like the world or something like that. Then Black Panther will take that approach of like, we need to kill them. And while there is recognition here that Black Panther is operating in a more calculated form, he's operating in a more methodical form, even then it just seems chaos, right? It seems like chaos and pandemonium. And so ultimately you end up having Betty, who approaches She-Hulk, and she doesn't go to attack. She just kind of looks at her with this expectation of, are you going to do anything about this? And that's when She-Hulk seemingly has to choose her allegiance. She's at this point where she kind of has to choose the Hulk family, or she has to choose the Avengers. And the reality is that it makes sense here because of the fact that she was really the last holdout. And that's what makes things kind of intriguing, because one thing to bear in mind, we're like 3 issues out from the conclusion of Al Ewing's run. So who knows what form this is going to take. But the reality is she's part of the Hulk family. Whether she wants to admit it or not, whether she sees herself that way or not, she definitively is. And so she basically quells the entirety of the conflict with just one of those sonic claps and sends the Avengers all flying. And so in response to that, a kind of teleportation gun is ultimately fired, and that basically allows Gamma Flight and the Hulks to essentially take off, right? To basically bail out. And that's when She-Hulk ends up going with them. And so in essence, She-Hulk has now stood against the Avengers, and she's now currently operating alongside the Incredible Hulk family, more or less. That's kind of nuts, because basically everybody who's irradiated with gamma mutation is now aligned on a particular side, right? This is probably the most true statement, if there's ever been one, of really an entire Hulk family, right? That's really what it is here. But I'm kind of curious, like, what direction this is going to go in. Like, I'm curious where we're going to end up seeing this kind of conclude. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section about Al Ewing's run so far, and I will catch you all later. Peace.